End of the World as We Knew It, written by Jeff Barbour, read by Jeff Barbour. The cover of the book shows a globe of the planet, and over the top of the globe are various images of cities and of statuary in Easter Island. There's a rocket blasting off. Actually, it's the space shuttle. So those are some of the themes that are involved in End of the World as We Knew It. The preface, the book is entitled End of the World as We Knew It, in parentheses. This is the condensed edition of a much larger work written by Jeff Barbour, copyright 2006-2007, Golden Phoenix Publishing, ISBN 978-1-84728-201-9. Other books by Jeff Barbour are Ritual of Stone, Blue Planet and Beyond, in both a hardbound and a softbound version. Recently, a CD has come out by Jeff Barbour of original jazz-styled music called Likes Everything She Do. Yorana, here's the dedication. This book would not have been possible without friends Vanessa and Heather, whose encouragement carried me to Easter Island. I am also thankful for Vanessa's adept eye at framing insightful photographs and Heather's visionary artwork gracing the cover. In addition, my thanks go out to Sasha Klisanek, Nom de Camera Sasha Flamia, and those inveterate world travelers Max and Diane Lang for also sharing their fine photographs of Easter Island with the readers of this book. While staying in Rapa Nui, some wonderful contacts were made. Among them were Napohe Tapano and Helga Thien, host and hostess of Cabanas Napohe, accommodating our group's excursions by foot and bicycle throughout the island in December 2005. Napohe and Helga also provided translations from Rapa Nui to English for inclusion in the text. After temporarily losing track of our rented bicycles on the island, Heather and I found a friend in spirit, Stephanie Polly, who shared some of the island's legendary past with us as the southern Milky Way spun its gossamer web of light overhead by night, and the summer sun ascended to brilliant culmination by day. I would also like to thank wife Sharon for her support, without which trip and book would not be possible. Maruru. This brief book is dedicated to all those past, present, and future that have, are, and will help the planet, the blue planet, go beyond. Contents: The Sky is Falling. That's the forward, page 1, chapter 1, An Island Set in Stone. Page 3, chapter 2, Air, Fire, Water, and Earth. Page 11, chapter 3, European Discovery by Sea. Page 21. Chapter 4, A World on the Edge. Page 33. Chapter 5, End of the World as We Knew It. Page 41. Chapter 6, The Future Laid Bare, page 45. Chapter 7, The Crux of the Issue, page 51. Chapter 8, A Vision for the Future, page 59. There's an afterwards entitled A Parable of Two Peoples on page 65. A glossary of English Rapa Nui phrases and words on page 69. And there are 3 notes from The Planet, Blue Planet, and Beyond on page 71. This book is a condensed version of a much larger work called Blue Planet and Beyond. And there's some additional information here. To read this book is to venture into diverse realms where many lines of thought converge and spheres of influence overlap. If there's any truth to be discovered in these pages, it's to be found in the heart and mind of the reader. Choice is the only truly human prerogative. Where human beings exist in abundance, every one and thing prospers. Wherever decline is seen, choosing is an abeyance simply because true human beings are few. There's but one alternative to an abiding sense of responsibility for the many creatures with whom we share the planet and share future generations of humankind. An excess of zeal for discovering error and inaccuracy. Changing ourselves is harder than destroying our world. There are a number of photographs. I won't list them here. Trying to get this read down to 1 CD. It's a relatively short book. As photographs, as mentioned, one was provided by NASA from the space shuttle. Sasha Flamia, Max and Diane Lang. David A. Hardy provided some of the fine illustrations on the book. Vanessa Ruddy took some really nice photographs that I've included herein. There's a shot of the USS Mohican, which visited Easter Island in the 19th century, provided by the U.S. Navy. The forwards. The sky is falling. It was Chicken Little, I believe, who first said, "The sky is falling." Though Miss Little's hysterics were occasioned by an acorn on the noggin, we might interpret her statement today to mean the end is near. This book soberly asserts that the end Chicken referred to actually lies in the lifetime of those born as baby boomers between 1946 and 64. This one generation of humankind stands simultaneously at the pinnacle of cultural achievement and the foot of a daunting climb to true planetary awareness. Assuming the last of the boomers manage to see their 80th birthday, the end of the current age will come about before the year 2044, or quite possibly much earlier. The real question, however, is not when the current age will take its leave, but what the age to follow will bring. One possibility has already played out. That occurred on an isolated Pacific island far, far away, but really not so very long ago. Another possibility can be seen almost nightly on television in the form of Star Trek, especially the Next Generation series. Assuming our science fiction writers are actually undiagnosed clairvoyants, such a future will see humanity moving onward and upward, working in harmony or not with other sentient beings from around the galaxy, dealing with the same kind of issues that at one time nearly tore the home world, planet Earth, apart. This book, as said, is a highly condensed version of one already written, Blue Planet and Beyond. Readers engaged by the end of the world, while also having more time in their hands and questions on their minds, may want to consider a copy. However, Blue Planet and Beyond's main themes, that of the need for a powerful grassroots movement towards ecological sustainability and a future institutional push toward interstellar colonization, are featured in this one. Readers interested in a more in-depth discussion of Easter Island while also preferring a more conventional book format, Blue Planet and Beyond incorporates inset columns that expand on themes based on Easter Island as a microcosm to Earth's macrocosm, may consider reading an alternative book, Ritual of Stone, which strips away all the additional sidebar commentary. Although each book is intended to meet the need of different readers, all three hope to encourage the people of planet Earth to more thoroughly examine their lives and lifestyles. Such an examination will undoubtedly lead to extraordinary insights into our relationships with one another, past and future, generations of humanity, and the natural world, the ultimate foundations of our lives and well-being. End of the World as We Knew It, Chapter 1, An Island Set in Stone. The people of Chile call it Isla de Pascua. Local inhabitants adopted the name Rapa Nui. The Maori, first discovering it, gave it the name Tapito o Tehenua, Navel of the World. The Dutch, rediscovering it, named it Het Eiland van Pasen. Today, many of us call it Easter Island. By whatever name it is known, much remains unknown about a place quickly passing from the excitement of discovery through tentative exploration, laborious development, to sweeping and irreversible change once human beings called it their own. Easter Island is most noted for the nearly 900 moi, massive stone statues, found throughout the island. Of these, less than 300 are erected on ahu, sacred raised stone platforms, mostly found along the island's coast. 400 moi remain within the main stone quarry at Rano, Raraku. Another 100 lie abandoned in transit, half in or near the rim of the Rano Raraku crater itself. For islanders, the success rate of getting a statue on base was about as good as an American Baseball League batting champ. There's a picture here on page 3 showing a NASA space shuttle view of Easter Island. Although many theories have been proposed to explain the low success rate of islanders at shaping and erecting moi, in the end there's probably no single, simple answer to explain such a complex socio-environmental phenomena. Yet, based on what we now know of the island's limitations, we can say that if islanders were at the plate, the island itself was throwing the pitches. We do know that over a 700-year-long period, the population equivalent of a large town managed to burn through enough calories to shape, at minimum, one 14-ton, 13-foot-tall stone statue each year. Every other year, a completed statue was moved an average distance of roughly 3 miles. Every 3 years, a single statue was placed upright on a stone platform consisting of more than 200 tons of volcanic rock and earth. Photograph on page 4, the largest moai ever shaped lies in state within the island's main quarry at Rano Rariku. That moai is called El Gigante. All the effort going into moai construction, transport, and erection on the part of islanders was accomplished using nothing more than the simplest of stone tools, logs, and trusses made of felled trees, rope of entwined fibrous plants, and the combined strength of hundreds of human beings possessed of an extraordinary zeal for hard work, plus a pronounced propensity for overachievement. What was it within islanders driving them to undertake all the hard work and sacrifice needed to shape, move, and erect moai? What did they get in return? What was the fundamental itch being scratched by creating such massive monoliths? The classic answer to this question is hegemony over island governance. Some pronounce it hegemony or hegemony. Hegemony. What the heck? Through the instrumentality of moai erection, one of the dozen clans found on the island displaced another from power. This was done in an agreed-upon way, avoiding bloodshed and allowing islanders to achieve a common bond of kinship through the resulting cultural inheritance. Although such a one-upsmanship approach to leadership selection may have been in place, there was far more to moai craft than the political prize of governing the island. On page 5, there's a photograph of the lone moai. It's located at Ahu Kote Riku of the Tahai complex, which was resurrected by archaeologist William Malloy in the late 1960s. Moai are thought to be the embodiment of kuhane, spirits of deceased ancestors, remaining with the island in the afterlife and overseeing the ritual of daily life. The presence of kuhane ensured the well-being of the living, inspiring generations of islanders to achieve their highest and best. Moai and the bones of ancestors buried behind them on Ahu played a role similar to Egyptian pyramids and sarcophagi. Like Egyptians, the people of ancient Easter Island, which I refer to as Hanuans, believe their works help bind men of eminence to the earth. Hanuans hope the greatest of their ancestors would continue influencing events, though they may have died many generations past. In a sense, islanders made earth-bound spirits, varua, out of hundreds of deceased ancestors. The presence of such varua was intended to ensure a lasting prosperity for generations to come. There's a photograph on page 6 which shows unactivated moai abandoned along the flanks of Rano Rariku on the path of the moai. These are moai that have been abandoned or left behind in transit for one reason or another currently unexplained. Among Rapa Nui, the story of moai commissioning is told in this way. A patriarch dies, his wife mourns. Their children gather to ask, "Mother, shall we make a memory of father?" She agrees. A banquet is held for the carvers in stone and the fishermen who must feed the carvers as they shape the memorial to the dead patriarch. The children feed the fishermen in turn from what they gather of produce and eggs. Every day the children collect food to feed the fishermen, who fish to feed the stone carvers, who work very hard until the statue is shaped, after which the truly hard work of moai transport and erection begins. Perhaps we simply need to cast a larger net before truly landing the reason why so few moai ended up on sacred sites. On a purely physical level, the island offered many challenges. Certainly the half-dozen or so stone carvers had a hard enough task, but during moai transport, load on bodily resources spiked up much further. That spike occurred as the number of participants multiplied many times over, potentially to as many as 1,000 hands. Fresh water, never in abundance on the island, was also hard to come by. As moai grew larger and heavier, certain physical hurdles could no longer be jumped, if only due to exhaustion. On page 7 there's a photograph of the 7 moai of Ahu Akivi, which were re-erected again by the archaeologist William Malloy, this time in the late 1950s. A very fabulous site, by the way, one well recommended, and not located on the periphery of the island, but in its center, which says something about it. When success in this venture did occur, it meant far more than anything another well-sculpted ancestral statue planted serenely in a nicely arrayed stone garden overlooking clan activities. By erecting Moy, clans overcame numerous, often insuperable obstacles together. Their collective skill and action translated into greater depth of clan confidence and virtue. That virtue, in the form of mana, confidence, strength, or power, accumulated in sacred Ahu, large raised platforms of stone and earth, to become an extraordinary yet subtle gift to be handed down for generations to come. We Westerners really need to consider, this is an aside comment, this idea of mana, because we all strive for it in one way or another. We just don't recognize what it is. It is confidence in our ability to start and to finish a task. Page 8 shows the 15 Moy of Ahu Tongariki, found almost due east of Ranararaku. Now, this is the largest collection of standing Moy on the island. I personally didn't get a chance to visit this when I saw it at a distance, but it is quite spectacular too. In its prime, 900 to 1600s Common Era, the Moy culture of Tapita Otahenua was a great society. Like all such societies, certain fundamental challenges had to be met. The fact that some cultures scale vertiginous heights while others barely achieve a rude ignominy is the warp and woof of comparative history. Once again, like individuals, like tribes, a people as a whole have this capacity from mana, developed to one degree or another. Destiny, we might think, is like the wind blowing where it will and leaving on its own terms. Yet that is not entirely the case. Destiny is the working out in time and space of opportunity, genius, and limitation. Challenging circumstances and inner strength play significant roles in greatness. Numerous obstacles must be overcome to express true genius, yet those obstacles, combined with a sense of opportunity, are essential to its revelation. As we look deeper into the story of Tapita Otahenua, Easter Island, we come to recognize opportunity, genius, and adversity in Moy society. No society becomes great simply by surviving, nor does wealth or even an advanced technology account for it. A truly great society reveals something timeless and universal about the essence of being human. One aspect of that revelation is the effort to give form to otherwise unseen possibilities deep down in the human spirit. On page 9, there's a photograph of the 5 Moy at Ahu Vaiuri, among the earliest groups of statues shaped on the island. The mere fact that Moy are massive doesn't assure our respect and appreciation for the Moy culture. Greater still is to see Moy as a people's highest expression of self. This insight peels away the first layer of mystery from Easter Island, yet like stone strata in the earth itself, other layers remain. Here we have an adventurous people whose cultural heritage and genetic makeup included over 100 generations of colonization by sea. Arriving at an island considered to be the end of the world, once settled, they came to recognize they were possessed of a fire in the belly demanding ongoing risk, ordeal, hardship, and challenge. Shrugging off idleness, they found in Ranararaku stone, called tough, the stuff needed to assuage the fire within. Yet that same fire ultimately raged across the entire island, destroying virtually everything in its path. It's quite clear that the shaping and staging of Moy was of great significance to the people of Tapita Otahenua. Yet the nature of that significance will continue to elude us until we come to ask one fundamental question. What would it mean to accomplish something of that stature in our own lives, something demanding the most out of every aspect of our personal and collective beings? I, of course, am mindful of the Apollo program to get to the moon in the 1960s. That was an astonishing national achievement, and this country accumulated a tremendous wealth of mana, as well as practical technological advances that came out of that program. The United States has not participated in anything as great, with possibly the exception of the World Wide Web and the Internet, which was probably a little more international in scope than the Apollo program. In pondering this question, we may never fully arrive at an understanding of the fundamental motive behind all the hard work Hanuan society undertook to construct, transport, and erect Moy. Many layers of collective human psyche may need to be probed and rolled back before striking the bedrock of causality with certainty. What is clear is that we humans are charged with powers and potencies that may not be long suppressed. These powers, these potencies, must inevitably vent in and through us. Our role in the matter is to direct them with an eye to the greatest possible good for everyone and everything in our sphere. Perhaps in the end we will find that the best way to understand a thing is not to arrive at some ultimate answer, but to simply ask the ultimate question. End of the World as We Knew It, Chapter 2, Air, Fire, Water, and Earth. On average, Easter Island rises some 500 feet above the world's largest ocean. In longitude, it emerges 2,300 miles west of La Serena along Chile's rugged coast. In latitude, Isla de Pascua falls 3,500 miles south of the tip of Baja California. Such numbers say one thing. Easter Island is one of the most remote habitable places on Earth. And there's a picture here of the approximate location of Easter Island, well south of Baja California and west of Chile. Like thousands of other islands breaking the wave-strewn surface of the vast Pacific, Easter Island took form as subterranean material broke through the great basin of basalt separating Earth's hydrosphere from its viscous mantle. The birth of the navel of the world was no single short-lived and painless event. Dissatisfied with first efforts, nature exposed the cool ocean waters of the South Pacific to the scorching fires of melted stone on 3 separate occasions. Triangle-shaped Easter Island is dominated by 3 main volcanic upthrusts: Manga, Terra Vaca to the north, Manga Puacatiki to the east, and Rano Cao on the hypotenuse from Puacatiki to the southwest. Each of these volcanic peaks rises more than 1,000 feet above sea level. A 4th caldera near the western base of Manga Puacatiki at Rano Raraku lies a mere 50 meters above the ocean. That caldera is the womb from which islanders delivered the hundreds of massive stone statues, about 1/3 of which face inland from along the island's rugged coast. Here we see a picture of the location of Easter Island's main volcanoes on page 12, plus an illustration of a volcanic eruption, nicely done by David Hardy. A volcanic island such as Easter Island is literally a new creation. The land supporting it is a gift yielded up from subterranean fastnesses deep beneath the ocean. Like the land, life too comes from elsewhere. Carried by wind, and sea, colonizing plants and animals begin a process of evolutionary divergence leading into entirely new forms. Over the 3 million years since Easter Island's crown first broke the Pacific Ocean's roiling surface, more than 100 native species evolved, the vast majority of which are now extinct by act of the island's latest colonizing species, humankind. Like all other creatures on the island, human beings are transplants. As colonists, their arrival brought about a form of isolation, ultimately leading to changes in behavior, if not appearance. Resources available on the island allowed colonists to become a unique people, the people of Tapita Otahenua. On the island of Tapita Otahenua, Henuans achieved a might and capacity completely reshaping the face of the island itself. Here we have a photograph on page 13 of Anakena Beach, which is probably the most attractive and Polynesian-style beach you will find on Easter Island. Accompanied by everything needed to begin life anew, the first millennium Maori ancestors of today's Rapa Nui approached Tapita Otahenua from the northwest. Following the rugged coast southeast, colonizers took land on the island's main landfall, Anakena Beach. Licked by South Pacific white-capped waves, Anakena Beach would rival anyone's picture of paradise. Pure white sands, flanked by a sloping green promontory, led inland to verdant green grasses surmounted by the plosive canopy of enormous palms and other unique native tree species. The few things missing from this Polynesian picture of perfection were exotic fish darting among coral reefs and the spray of a plunging waterfall graced by the play of refracted light. The top of page 14, we have a photograph of Manga Teravaca in the distance, with Hangaroa, which is the main town, at its foot, and the Pacific Ocean to the left. Manga Teravaca was the first mountain seen by the colonizers as they approached the island from the northwest. Maori arrival on Tapita o Te Henua completed 2 millennia of Polynesian expansion throughout a largely wedge-shaped region of 16 Pacific island groups. That venture began 2,000 years earlier among the Lapita people of New Caledonia. As a result of hardy wayfinding by sea, Maori colonies were established among the Outer Solomon, Samoa, Cook, Loyalty, Vanuatu, Fiji, Tonga, Tuamotus, Marquesas, and Hawaiian Islands. Some 300 high and low islands, plus numerous atolls, were explored at a time when Greek and other Old World seafarers navigated mostly by hugging coastlines to avoid being lost at sea. These were a venturesome people. Maori wayfinders headed out into the open sea following prevailing winds and seabird flyways. Using water-avoidant frigate birds, they detected land unseen beyond the horizon. Scanning the sky for recognizable stars by night and birds by day, the Maori push was so successful not a single habitable island within the Polynesian sphere was overlooked. Then we have a photograph at the top of page 15 displaying stones arrayed at Ahu Tapita Kura may have been carried to the island as ballast aboard the original colonizing waka or canoe of Hotu Matua, striving parent. Despite its minuteness and the immensity of the world's largest ocean, it was the seabirds that betrayed the island's existence to questing Maori seafarers. Such seabirds were capable of flights hundreds of miles out to sea. Following them back to rooks on the island was Hotu Matua, Maori for striving parent, and fellow colonists. The large colonizing group of adults and children landing on Anakena Beach circa 800 CE are now thought to have originated from the Pitcairn Islands, located 1,200 miles west-northwest. Captained by Hotu Matua, the woven reeds sailed strapped together twin-hulled ocean-going canoes, waka, may have held a little more than 24 Maori adults accompanied by numerous children, piglets, chickens, edible plants, and pots of fresh water. It's clear that Hotu Matua and clan planned to make a fresh start of things right from the beginning. Even before the first boat bottoms struck sand, we can envision many of the 75 or so Maori men, women, and children leaping joyously into the water to swim excitedly for shore. Soon thereafter, expert hands would drag ocean-going canoes carrying them more than 1,000 miles across cool Pacific waters onto the beach. Here's a picture of Ovahe Beach, a very isolated beach with beautiful white sands located on the island. It's one of the few parts of Easter Island that have been left pretty much unchanged since colonization. On arriving at Tapita o Te Henua, the Maori achieved their ultimate yet unwitting aim, that of expanding Polynesian influence throughout the central Pacific Ocean. They had arrived at the end of their world, and with that arrival, the world they came to call their own would soon come to an end. For even as Hotu Matua and company took shore, the stage was set to repeat a scenario so recently left behind: natural resource depletion due to overpopulation. The Ouroboros of population boom and bust was already poised to swallow its own tail. There was little those living closest to the serpent's head could do about it. Colonists were far too englamored of their great luck and the apparent fertility of the island to see the connection between where they were and where they'd been. At the time of discovery, Tapita o Te Henua held a vast and varied population of seabirds, including globe-spanning albatross. Smaller birds, such as the sooty tern, flitted among thousands of nests on island cliffs. Beyond the cliffs lay a sweeping canopy of innumerable immense trees. Branches extended well away from stout trunks, supported by root systems fed by thin but rich soils fertilized during long past ages of volcanic activity. Were it not for the island's subtropical location, some 27 degrees south latitude, it might easily have been described as a tropical paradise. Photograph on page 17. Manga Puakatiki is seen from near Ovahe Beach along the island's rugged coast. While Taravaka was first seen by Polynesian colonizers, Puakatiki was the first cone looming above the ocean seen by the island's discoverers in the 18th century. Of bones found in Midden by island researchers, a large number are those of the common dolphin. This particular cetacean is not usually known to frequent island shoals, preferring life in the open ocean. The short-beaked common dolphin, Delphinus delphis, is perhaps the most colorfully painted dolphin on Earth and often travels in large pods and exhibits extremely playful behavior. On the island itself, numerous palm trees grew to great heights. These were joined by throngs of a half-dozen other unique native species. Such woodlands could easily have sourced all the pulp, bark, energy, and some of the nutrient needs of a modest population in perpetuity. Photograph at the top of page 18, looking north towards Manga Taravaka along the Rano Kau crater rim, which includes an interior natural cistern of water. Trees, including tall, broad Aphetonia and Eliocarpus, grew along the rich volcanic slopes of Taravaka. These species were of a size and type that could be felled and dug out in the style of ocean-going waka favored among Maori seafarers. Many, however, took the form of smaller outrigger canoes used for day voyages seeking large aquatic prey. Although many trees were used to construct dugout canoes and homes, most provided heat for comfort, food preparation, and cremation of the dead. Later, as the Moai culture gained traction, trees fell in droves for trusses, levers, and rolling stock. These were employed to disinter massive statues from the quarry at Rano Rariku, move them across the island's rolling terrain, and erect them on island cliffs near the sea. By the time the last Moai was erected in 1680, very few tall trees remained to feel the bite of the woodsman's stone axe. Photograph, top of page 19, womb of the Moai at Rano Rariku as it appears from the north. And I assure you, it really looks like a belly button. Initially, islanders subsisted on what could be gleaned from the sea and local environment. This approach was not sustainable. Within a few generations, all the seabirds, manu, were gone. Deliberately or not, this act of predation deflated the aura of winged creatures originally luring Hotu Matua and his Maori band to the island. But the loss of the birds had a second, more profound, yet very subtle impact on the island. Seabirds hunt far out to sea. On returning to nest, the birds pass nutrient-rich droppings, which help reinforce the soil and feed smaller aquatic creatures. These small creatures, in turn, draw in other larger creatures. By preying on seabirds, islanders assured that the island and nearby waters would begin a tailspin of ever-decreasing productivity, even as their own numbers were poised to increase geometrically. Little did Hotu Matua know it, but that first and all generations to come were living on borrowed resources. Resources laid down volcanically 100,000 years earlier took a mere 8 centuries of ingenious human exploitation to bankrupt. Along the way, colonists had one wild ride just as Hotu Matua would have liked it. For Hanuans were not content merely to survive. Believing themselves to be the instruments of the highest achievements of Maori culture, they set out to populate the island with a statement in stone, proving their greatness and that of the ancestors before them. With the felling of the very last tree of a once richly canopied island, 4 realities set in. The possibility of leaving the island by ocean-going canoe was foreclosed. The practice of honoring the dead by cremation came to an end. The means to transport and erect stone statuary was forestalled, and most significantly, the ability to select leaders in a generally accepted manner was lost. These changes radically altered the quality of Hanuan life and led to a period of internecine conflict, destroying a once prosperous, well-ordered society. All these events played out in the 2 generations following the erection of the last moai at Ahu Tapita in 1680 and the arrival of the first Europeans in 1722. During those few years, islanders watched as crops failed and the neighborhood suffered intimidation and bloody conflict. The few children surviving to adulthood looked on each other with paranoia, ate rats, battled neighbors, chewed the flesh of the fallen, cracked human bone to glean marrow, hid in caves, and pondered the futility of a lot of good-looking but soon-to-be oddly tumbled stone statuary. An island whose ecosystem once saw the needs of potentially as many as 30,000 dynamic and creative people deteriorated swiftly, radically reducing population numbers by an order of magnitude and leaving a few thousand survivors without a once proud heritage of cultural advance and sublime achievement. End of the world as we knew it. Chapter 3, European Discovery by Sea. The name Easter Island derives not from its easterly Polynesian location, but from its day of European discovery. Easter Island, April 5th, 1722. That discovery occurred during a prolific era of Pacific Ocean exploration by Old World seafarers. Although Maori colonization of Tapita o Te Henua may have ended one cycle of advance, Het Island van Passen was encountered 1,000 years later as Europeans followed trade winds west during their own voyages into the unknown. It fell to Dutch Admiral Jacob Roggeveen and the crews of 3 tall ships to make first European acquaintance with the people and place of Het Island van Passen. Knowing there had been earlier reports of islands in the region, Roggeveen called together a council of 3 commanders to formally compare earlier descriptions and locations with their own. Briefly becalmed some 9 miles from the island, formal articles were prepared authenticating an original discovery at sea. Page 21 includes a photograph of the USS Mohican, which visited Easter Island in 1891. 2 days later, the Commodore described the island as treeless, yet fertile with an abundance of banana, sweet potato, and sugar cane. In the place of trees stood tall stone statues, yet the people who might have erected them hailed his ships aboard frail, leak-prone, unseaworthy reed boats. In his 1891 book, Tapita o Te Henua, or Easter Island, William J. Thompson, paymaster aboard the U.S. Navy ship Mohican, cites some early descriptions of islanders. Roggeveen states, "The people are well proportioned by limb, having large and strong muscles, and are great in stature. They have snow-white teeth, which are uncommonly strong. Indeed, even among the aged and gray, we were surprised to see them crack large, hard nuts whose shells were thicker than those of our peach seeds." La Peroise praises the beauty of the women, who, he says, resemble Europeans in color and features. Monsieur Rollin states that the females were more liberally endowed with grace and beauty than any which were afterwards met with. The natives are not of large stature. A few of the men are tall, but they are of spare build, stand erect with straight carriage, and appear taller than they really are. Despite their fitness, the population of some 2,500 islanders discovered on Het Island van Passen lived lives of cultural desperation. Due to the excesses of earlier generations, population and numbers making an advanced society possible were gone. Europeans found an island and people shorn of the natural wealth and social cohesion needed to express the innate genius of a once thriving civilization. According to ship's logs, numerous massive stone statues were present, especially along the coast. Yet because the island lacked any trees taller than 10 feet and its people were of little technical sophistication, Roggeveen was unable to explain the statue's existence. From the earliest moments of European discovery, it was clear that Het Island van Passen held a mysterious legacy from a far more glorious past. Admiral Roggeveen, like many visitors to Rapa Nui since, was highly intrigued and deeply baffled. Once Roggeveen's tall ships set sail for the western Pacific, a radical change occurred in the relationship between islanders and the Moi of their Hanuan ancestors. Such a change was brought about as a result of the first contact with men from elsewhere, Tangata Hiva, but mostly grew out of the remarkable materials, technologies, and huge vessels the explorers commanded. Not long after the masts of Feinhoven, Eagles, and African Galley dropped below the horizon, many Moi tumbled to the ground at the hands and ropes of disgruntled islanders. It was the end of an era. Photograph near the top of page 23, a lone moi looks inland from the low cliffs north of Pueblo Hangoroa at Ahu Ko Te Riku of the Tahai complex. Islanders did more than simply topple the statues of ancestors. Some show intentional damage in the form of decapitation. To do so, moi had large stones placed in their paths as they fell, breaking their necks. Indeed, most moi were toppled face down in shame. Only one group of 3 at Ahu Akahanga, Mound Anchor Bay, were toppled backward, allowing them to see the light of the sun by day and stars by night. We can understand decapitation as expression on the part of an islanders to never ever again see the resurrection of the way of life, system of belief, or paternalistic method of governance associated with the moi culture. To cut off the head of a thing, say a snake, is to ensure it will never recover. Yet today moi rise again, if only as cultural artifacts. Photograph at the top of page 24. The 3 moi at Ahu Akahanga were toppled face up rather than down, as on the rest of the island. Although some investigators attribute moi toppling to clan conflict over limited island resources, Roggeveen made no mention of toppled moi or even hunger among islanders on their discovery. In fact, Roggeveen reports that islanders turned to the moi in an extreme form of supplication after his arrival. Clearly, most resource-based conflict worked its way out during the 2 generations following the erection of the last moi at Ahu Tapitakura in 1680 and Roggeveen's arrival in 1722. Moi started falling after islanders were exposed to the huge 3-masted ships and metal-based technologies of Europeans. Whether driven over the edge by culture shock or not, inhabitants clearly underwent a tectonic shift in their worldview. Before we can fully understand that shift, however, we must penetrate to a deeper sense of what was rejected. Moi toppling had greater implications than simply rejecting a single island's unique culture. Toppling was, at essence, an attack on the cultural inheritance of the entire Maori lineage, including its religious underpinnings. The nature of that attack was against Ahu. Ahu, on which moi stand, may be described as raised sacred grounds laced with stones defining a common ring pass knot. Ahu, literally a mound or heap, were usually constructed in the shape of ocean-going canoes with parallel flanks and tapered ends. Edge stones were built up to form a low perimeter wall. Footstones were carefully arrayed throughout an infield and led up to large, rough stone foundations on which as many as 15 or as few as a single moi were erected. To topple statues on such ground would have been an extreme act for a people once possessed of a deep sense of taboo. Such a thing would be tantamount to formerly God-fearing Christians entering a church to desecrate a cross. The collapse of the moi culture was, in essence, the fragmentation of society. In losing the ability to erect moi, islanders were denied a common sense of community and an agreeable means to choose leaders, as arbitrary as that method might seem. People once thought to be part of an us became a them. From self through other ultimately leads to thing, an object of exploitation. Such a downward spiraling path is common to all post-apocalyptic societies. Within 2 generations of erecting the last and largest moi at Ahu Tapitakura, the island's population fell by a factor of 10, assuming a pre-collapse population of roughly 25,000. Another 2 generations passed, and the bulk of the stone statues stared face down, burying themselves in the wind-swept dust of time. With the end of a viable centralized government, the island went into complete free fall. It would be more than a century before it hit bottom. It's often the case that once human beings suffer a great cataclysm, much thought goes into recognizing failings and making amends. The first peoples of North America went through a similar period of reflection after horse and mammoth, native to the continent, were made extinct through, among other things, wasteful hunting practices, often involving the use of fire to drive herds off cliffs. The Indian answer to all this was to see themselves as a small part of a much larger sacred natural order. Although islanders indulged their spate of statue toppling because of a loss of faith in the power of Ahu and Moi, a fresh wave of insight followed as they sought a new identity. This expressed itself in what became the Rongo Rongo cult. The religion of Rongo Rongo marked a fundamental shift in the way islanders related to the world around them. While the Moi culture venerated the spirits of ancestors, Rongo Rongo worshipped the spirit of nature. There's a photograph on the left upper corner of page 26, Easter Island stone head on the slopes of Rano Rariku. Such heads, by the way, are full bodies. It's just that 2/3 of the body is covered in soil and dust. And many of them do stand upright. Nature worship might appear to be a giant leap backward for a people once reveling in the power of human adaptation and contrivance. Yet there's a far more sophisticated way of thinking about the natural world and the inscrutable actions of invisible spirits deporting themselves through properties and behaviors of rock, plant, fish, bird, and animal. Arriving at this new way of understanding animism simply means letting go of the separative notion that boundaries exist between self and other or between individual creatures. Enlightened animism means to embrace the far more complex concept that all things reveal a single life. That life works through numerous forms, each displaying peculiarities of behavior and awareness. This way of thinking sees behavior as an aspect of corporeal sophistication and physical limitation. Among islanders, Rongo Rongo expressed itself through a body of imagery blending human and non-human characteristics. New artistic styles evolved in stone and wood, Rona, projecting human attributes onto birds and various creatures of the sea. Islanders became animists. Among animists, each and every creature holds kuhane within itself. The cultist sense of self expanded to include more of the natural world. There is a photograph of a Rongo Rongo statue, and it's located at the Mataveri Airport, the common means by which most visitors come to Easter Island. The ability to erect Moi and the mana it gives practitioners was gone. Hubris passed, correction followed, humility took hold, and human beings, like all other creatures, struggled to survive and raise enough offspring to succeed them. The issue of island governance still needed to be addressed, however. To meet this need, each spring a contest was held to determine clan dominance until the next. Strong young champions were selected from each clan, gathering focus in stone huts and diving into the sea from Orongo Point on the slopes of Rano Kau. The first male to swim the breach to the largest island, Moto Nui, collect an egg, and return with it intact was made Birdman of the Year, Manu Tara. Seeing the many brave swimmers clamber down a cliff, throw themselves into potentially shark-patrolled waters, search frantically among distant island crags for eggs, then race back again with the surging tide was no doubt the high point of the year for the entire community. It had all the best elements of drama: risk, gain, action, heroism, perhaps some villainy, and significance. No competitor asked, "What's my motivation?" Photograph at the top of page 28 shows Moto Nui, the largest of the three smallest islands, Moto Iti and Moto Kau, off of Orongo Point. Despite Rongo Rongo's best efforts, the cult was not cohesive enough to inoculate the society against events, for a mortal challenge came from across the sea as a new type seafarer first began to exploit the people, then the land as well. Yet in the 80 years following discovery, islanders were left pretty much alone. By the turn of the 19th century, the age of exploration ended and that of exploitation began. But early on, the island offered little in the way of commercial or military advantage to distant European sea powers, who were primarily inclined to take inventory of the many Polynesian islands and assess their relative virtues. Given its poor harborage, lack of material for ship repair, and dearth of provisions, Easter Island offered very little of practical interest. Although Captain Don Philip Gonzalez claimed the island for Spain in 1770, the Spanish government failed to establish a presence or exert control over inhabitants and remaining resources. Had there been a Spanish garrison on the island, things might have gone differently, perhaps. The island was in no position to defend itself against the ravenous sea wolves that would blow in 30 years later. 2 years after Gonzales, English Captain James Cook visited the island to note the toppled plight of the Moi. Slightly later, the French explorer and Admiral Le Comte de la Pérouse briefly visited. Although little came of it, the Count's compassion for islanders was strong enough to plant peaches, plums, cherries, oranges, and lemons. Despite cultural backwardness, islanders were described as healthy and strong by early seafarers. Due to their attractive body art and lithe, shapely figures, island women were especially alluring. It shouldn't be surprising that venereal disease spread widely once later ships made the island a port of call for rest and relaxation. In 1802, the first abductions occurred as whaling vessels from the United States and elsewhere made the island a stop for recruits. Islanders were lured with trinkets onto the beach and encouraged at gunpoint to join in whale and seal hunts. It was unusual for anyone to refuse. Those leaving rarely returned. The main economic virtue of the island was its potential as a labor market, a market where fair exchange was not practiced with regularity. One story from this era features the crew of an American whaling vessel, the Nancy, that abducted a dozen men and a few less women in 1805 for a seal hunt on the Juan Fernandez Islands off the Chilean coast. After several days' journey out to sea, the crew allowed islanders to leave the hold. Due to the distance put between the Nancy and the island, captives were freed from chains without fear of escape on the part by the sailors. All the men promptly dove into the sea. Improbably, it's said that one Rapa Nui survived the several hundred-mile swim back to the island. In 1862, Peruvian slavers began massive raids for slave labor to fill domestic and mining roles in Peru. Over one-third of the island's population was carried off. The public outcry in Peru and elsewhere, plus pressure applied by the French government, forced an end to the practice and return of abductees. The few surviving to see the island again returned with smallpox and other diseases, mostly fomented by desperate conditions aboard transports. Human numbers plunged. Although poised to support a population of perhaps 3,000 in perpetuity, roughly 50 per square mile, the grim conditions and wanton behaviors of seafarers had accomplished a thing nature in her compassion had not. For a unique people of rare provenance had nearly been rendered extinct. On Saturday, December 18, 1886, William Thompson's ship, the USS Mohican, made Easter Island port of call, remaining through New Year's Eve of the same year. Despite the brevity of the stay, the Mohican expedition was the first truly comprehensive survey of the island, its people, their cultural, and numerous artifacts. In the resulting book, cited earlier, Thompson quotes a census taken by Mr. A. Salmon, a longtime resident of the island. The total number of natives is at present 155. Of these, 68 are men, 43 women, 17 boys under the age of 15 years, and 27 girls of corresponding age. The population has been for several years at a standstill, the births and deaths being about equal in numbers. The longevity of the islanders appears to compare favorably with natives of more favorable lands. Although the first Chilean vessel visited Rapa Nui in 1837, it wasn't until Chile successfully battled the combined might of Bolivia and Peru in the War of the Pacific, 1879 to 1884, that an interest was taken in the island. In 1888, a year after the Mohicans' departure, Chilean victors annexed Rapa Nui as Isla de Pascua. 12 Rapa Nui chiefs ceded perpetual sovereignty over the island. We can only think that in Chile, the chiefs thought they'd found a protecting influence to shield them from the rapacious tendencies of others. By World War II, the population of Isla de Pascua had slowly recovered to around 400. Children born of European fathers diluted Maori influence significantly, a thing not so bad when considering that inbreeding had multiplied some less than desirable characteristics. In 1956, adventurer archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl visited Isla de Pascua and unearthed the first torso of what was thought to be a simple stone head. Heyerdahl found the kneeling moi, Tukaturi. As an archaeologist, Heyerdahl was later eclipsed by the efforts of William Malloy, whose meticulous approach to Ahu restoration makes it possible to see the moi with a dignity and serenity comparable to the era of the Moi culture itself. And there's a photograph on page 31. Tukaturi looks towards Orongo Point and is thought to be one of the first or last statues shaped of tuff. It's also unusual in that it displays The kneeling moi actually displays leg extremities, which are not present on other moi on the island. Like Tukaturi, the Rapa Nui were on their knees in their relationship with the government of Chile. Things would only get better as the world turned and people everywhere began to recognize that other people were, in fact, people too. With the efforts of Malloy and others, the moi rose again. Knowledge of the moi builders multiplied. The island's history began to reveal itself. It would not be until the modern era that what remained of the people of Rapa Nui got their due. The rest of the world had gone through some terrible conflicts. With the end of the Second World War, the era of aggressive nationalism ebbed, and with the advent of the airplane, island tourism became possible in profound earnest. Real people met real people, and change was in the air. The final photograph of the chapter 3 is on page 32. It displays one of the few female moi. This is located at the Sebastian Englert Museum, located near Hongaroa. End of the world as we knew it. Chapter 4, A World on the Edge. To walk Easter Island is to traverse a land born of fire and stone. The island is a geological phoenix risen out of the plumes of subterranean rock and ash. Easter Island, like our own island Earth, was not formed in great tenderness or with a surplus of concern for the elements. Forged long ago by death of star and solidified cosmic radiance, some of those elements eventually came to share common affinity in time and space. Later, different affinities brought a far more recent convergence as virgin land and ambitious human colonizers collided. In the aftermath of colonization, island and islanders passed through a harrowing environmental crucible without, as of yet, seeing much of redemption. Photograph on page 33. Abandoned moi statue lies on a sparse field outside of Rano-Rariku. This is an example of a moi that was simply abandoned and left prone rather than standing in the soil. At one time, Tapita o Tehenua may have been the home of as many as 30,000 human beings. Between then and now, its population plummeted to 111 men, women, and children. The Earth currently supports 6.5 billions of us. Those 6.5 billions spread out evenly over the planet would see roughly 400 men, women, and children living on each square mile of habitable land. Easter Island in its prime, as Tapita o Tehenua, the navel of the world, may have supported a similar population density, but not for long. Some believe that visitors to Easter Island are seeing a presentiment of the future of the Earth. Photograph mid-page 34, Pueblo Hangaroa and neighboring bay. Today, the island's nearly 4,000 residents are considered members of the most remote population center in the world. Yet that very remoteness is what makes Easter Island the microcosmic reflection of Earth itself, a planet spinning precariously some 20,000 light-years from the fast lanes of the Milky Way galaxy. Without support from mainland Chile, it's doubtful the island's current population of density of 60 plus per square mile could be maintained. In the aftermath of any future planetary collapse, the Rapa Nui and a few billion surviving others would pass through an era of catastrophic privation and enter a time of seemingly interminable struggle for survival. Such an experience would not be new to islanders, but would be unprecedented for a once thriving global community, especially among the first world nations whose patterns of excess would have played a major role in its occurrence. English demographer Thomas Malthus first described population boom and bust in 1798. Malthus attributed population volatility to exponential increases in demand versus merely linear improvements in supply. He noted that wherever demand for resources exceeds sustainable levels of supply, catastrophic corrections are bound to occur whenever adjustments are not made in advance of crisis. In the language of economics, a Malthusian collapse follows a period of inflation, as less and less comes to cost more and more. On Tapita o Tehenua, things got bad enough that the common currency of the island was measured in human lives. This occurred as cannibalism became a necessity among a people desperate to survive in a largely depleted but still potentially productive environment. Malthusian collapses are rare among human populations. Usually a society simply uproots and moves on. Exceptions are those with no place to go. Blocked from migrating elsewhere, fundamental choices must be made. Some choose life at any cost, while others draw the line at making other humans a source of nutrition. It's largely unimaginable to those of us living today that anyone would take the life of another or even partake the flesh of the already dead when no other source of sustenance is available. Yet even recent events, such as the 16 members of the Uruguayan soccer team who survived in the Andes for 70 days after an air crash in 1972, hint at the powerful influence hunger can have on human behavior. Today, we live in a global society. It's becoming increasingly difficult to find untapped land able to support burgeoning human populations. Should we deplete Earth's resources or despoil it with waste to the point of undermining the health of its natural systems, there's simply nowhere else to go. The very fact that we've become global in scope forecasts a looming crisis involving the entire world. The very fact that we'd allow such a crisis to go unchecked suggests that behaviors such as cannibalism would be quickly adopted among those continuing to adhere to the notion of life at any cost. In nature, predators keep herbivore numbers in check. Predators necessarily make objects of their prey. To do otherwise means to identify with suffering, something rendering predation difficult. Easter Islanders went from a broad sense of community to the most extreme form of objectification possible, cannibalism on a widespread scale. Meanwhile, the drive to create underwent a complete reversal, becoming the urge to destroy. Pole flips of this type often come about when a society stretches too far, leading inevitably to snapback. Like cannibalism, such a thing is not beyond us today. Among natural species, those lacking in advanced tool use and technical complexity, Malthusian cycles rarely result in the complete devastation of a particular environment. A surplus of deer may lead to huge die-offs, but in time plants recover, as do the deer themselves. Although hard-pressed deer will take to stripping bark from trees, they're simply incapable of wringing every possible resource out of an environment, leaving no possibility of recovery. Humans can and do come much closer to accomplishing such a thing. Certainly in the case of the trees of Tepeta o Tehenua, Henuans did. The question before us is how the current global society will go in consuming planetary resources and destroying natural systems before harmonizing with the environment and achieving a sustainable population. The answer is not long in the waiting. Some believe we've gone too far already. One proof will be seen as prices for essentials such as food, water, shelter, and clothing outstrip income among families and individuals. Even now, we see increased competition among first world nations for natural resources, a necessary precursor to any Malthusian event. Immediately eclipsing the purely Malthusian aspects of overpopulation and resource depletion is the issue of global warming. Although human beings have used fire intentionally for nearly 1 million years, Earth's CO2, carbon dioxide levels remained largely determined by natural cycles until the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century. Initially, CO2 increases were due largely to the use of coal. Early in the 20th century, coal was deprecated in favor of cleaner-burning fossil fuels, yet the amount of combustion continued to increase dramatically. Today, the CO2 burden borne by Earth's atmosphere increases 1.5 parts per million per year. This might not seem like much, but the effects could prove devastating within the next 20 years as the planet's natural systems of heat exchange are pushed into overdrive. Even today, effects are beginning to show themselves. The trapping of heat by CO2, plus related increases in methane and water vapor, is a well-understood natural phenomena. In fact, some trapping is essential to the sustainable presence of life on Earth. Visible light penetrates the atmosphere to get converted into heat after absorption by Earth's oceans and land masses. That heat, in the form of infrared radiation, invisible light, is trapped by the air, driving up atmospheric temperatures. What isn't fully understood are the many and diverse consequences of turning up the heat on Earth's natural systems, geologically, meteorologically, and ecologically. Yet we're already seeing some of those consequences today in the form of record-breaking heat waves, cold snaps, droughts, floods, and hurricanes and monsoons, along with serious disruptions of plant and animal life patterns. What stands between us today and the collapse of tomorrow based on our own misguided behaviors? What stood between Hanuans and their own? In one word, leadership. Currently, we do a very poor job of selecting those whose task it is to oversee and manage our societies. We leave to corporations the problem of providing for our material needs, comforts, and entertainment. We leave to the ballot box the choice of those who are to represent us in national assemblies and executive offices. Yet we really have little influence over just who will fulfill the role of CEO, representative, or president. How is this possible? In the marketplace, we purchase things based on low price. In so doing, we reward corporations for exploiting the natural environment in a way that subsidizes the cost of production and distribution. CEOs are selected for such corporations largely based on their success in a competitive marketplace, a marketplace whose main discriminator is quantity, not quality, price, not cost, seductive marketing plans, not useful information. In terms of representatives and executives, we vote for candidates we've never personally met. We choose leaders based on images crafted by political handlers. In fact, most candidates are prefabricated choices at that. Like the goods we buy, the leaders we select come with hidden costs. While it's clear we can better discipline corporations by how we spend money, how can we improve the way we select political representatives? A future can be foreseen when a new approach to leadership is embraced. Forums could take place on every level of scale on the planet. Subordinate forums, on grassroots levels, would promote representatives to higher forums. Eventually, a single grand forum would coalesce, one including representatives from all over the earth. After ratification, such a forum would constitute a new, far more representative United Nations. The resulting meritocracy would be far less pervious to machination than the plutocratic systems of today, where insiders vet candidates and filter out leaders of true vision and integrity. Until then, and quite possibly in parallel, individual countries will maintain parochial forms of government. Just as today, executive office holders and representatives will be selected using proprietary methods. Within democracies, candidates will continue to be prepositioned by moneyed interests. In all cases, office holders will come under intense lobbying efforts by those same interests. Although Mr. Smith can go to Washington, something of integrity may be lost along the way. Because of this, the people will have to devote more and more of their time and finances in support of candidates of their own choosing. Meanwhile, investigative media will need to perfect their ability to smoke out corporate influence and backroom wheeler-dealers. Where such vigilance is not maintained, special interests will continue to take root in governance, choking the life out of the human spirit and exploiting the natural world to excess. Ultimately, we need to devise socio-political systems leaving no one out of the loop or disenfranchised. Otherwise, seeds of social unrest will surely undo even the best-laid plans for the future. Socio-political buy-in is an important component of moving away from resource-sapping conflict. Buy-in requires that everyone participate in governance. It all starts with self-governance and mounts collectively from there. Beyond politics, beyond economics, is the need to make better choices when it comes to reproduction. How many of us can sustainably support it in a world of limited resources and overburdened systems of natural reclamation? Population numbers are largely determined by how we live. Patterns of consumption and waste generation are the key. Where we live, what we eat, how we get around has huge collective impact. A first world lifestyle may be fine for 1 or 2 billions, but is disastrous for more. Yet such a lifestyle is being held as the ideal before a planet of 6.5 billion. To avoid collapse, we must solve the puzzle of abundant energy. Sources need to be devised that don't overtax planetary resources, disrupt natural systems, or place the world at toxic or radioactive risk. Our goal is to transition out of the age of combustion into the age of renewable energy. In so doing, we will mature to fulfill our responsibility towards all other species on the planet, along with any other planet such advanced energy systems may carry us to in the future. By remaining in the age of combustion, we continue to make all the wrong moves. Resources are being squandered, natural systems breaking down, species going extinct, biomass is being converted into greenhouse gases, and the world is being trashed. If we fail to make the transition out of the age of combustion, nature herself will see to a very necessary, possibly irreversible, correction in human numbers, technology, and culture. Such reversals are thought to require some 10 million years of ongoing geologic activity and species diversification to correct. By our next opportunity to get things right, we may not even be around. If we do succeed in redressing the imbalances, if we develop emission-free fusion-type power plants, and if we discipline our numbers, humanity's ecological footfall could come down lightly on the earth. We then may merit the good graces of the celestial gods who will help speed us on our upward way. No longer a curse in nature, we will become a blessing, one quite possibly to be shared with the entire galaxy. End of the World as We Knew It, Chapter 5 of the same name. The blue planet hangs without obvious mean support in the limitless ocean of space. Bathed in Sol's stable and long-lived light, the Earth spins freely, traversing a narrow, near-circular highway. Together Sun, Earth, and 8 other acknowledged planets, along with innumerable lesser bodies, comprise a solar system unique in all the cosmos. Yet our solar system, despite being nearly 5 billion years in antiquity, is not destined to remain as it is forever. 1 billion years from now, Earth will be rendered uninhabitable. At that time, the Sun's nuclear core will expand dangerously. The Earth will be scorched in the hot blue light of a superheated solar photosphere. With such a severe rise in temperature will come an end to all the oceans of Earth, and with those oceans, the end of a once thriving world. Long before that final denouement, we human beings will have made some fateful decisions determining our ultimate destiny in the universe, decisions as inescapable as life and death itself. We now live in a time when human choosing looms especially large on the planet's event horizon. Those of us living today may very well be the generations of final choice, sealing the fate of all humankind for millions of years to come. How is such a fateful confluence of time and space possible? Many thinkers have concluded that our world is rapidly being depleted of essential natural resources. In depleting those resources, we contaminate our atmosphere, water, and soil with life-endangering toxins. Chemical elements, once knowing their place in the scheme of things, now find themselves in configurations and concentrations, placing the Earth's natural cycles of healing and regeneration in jeopardy. Photograph at the top of page 42. A copse of non-native blue gum eucalyptus hints at the vast forests that once graced Tapeta Otehenua before the island's discovery. Of immediate concern are the many byproducts of combustion. Our widespread use of fire, combined with huge population increases and technological advancement, has increased carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere more than 40% since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. During that same period, average atmospheric temperatures across the planet have risen by 0.7 degrees centigrade. Today, there is no question that significant changes in the biosphere have occurred as a result of this one climate-impacting factor. Clearly, humanity must learn to value and preserve Earth's natural systems before attempting to take our irresponsible uses of fire to other worlds. In continuing along the current ecological trajectory, we may never mount the kind of charge to the stars needed to extend humanity's presence in the universe. And without human beings, who else might look out through knowing eyes upon a limitless cosmos and say, "It is good"? Tapeta Otehenua's ecological tragedy primarily took the form of deforestation. Islanders, bereft of trees, and the canoes trade trees made possible, had no means to leave the island. Similarly, human beings whose excesses could destroy Earth's environment will also be without future means to emigrate. Though what Easter Island teaches often comes by way of negative example, there remains much of beauty and wonder in the island's predicament. There, on 167 square kilometers of rolling terrain, 40 generations of living, loving, striving human beings built a prehistoric Stone Age culture rivaling any in the annals of humankind. Nature can heal Easter Island through her own methods. Without such a healing, the island may never recover. However, should she again take up her explosive birth pangs, something irreplaceable would be lost to the world. In the end, the island's destruction at the hand of humankind and the suffering those hands experienced in return may yet prove worthwhile. Our universe may very well exist to give birth to new things, especially to culture. We, human beings, are the agents of creation, not simply the product of blind forces and random acts of natural law. Should humanity pass into the night of eternity, the culture we leave behind may very well justify our existence, despite any mayhem introduced along the way. In creating such things as the Moy of the Hanuans, there is no need to go cowering into the darkness. In destroying a landscape once as extraordinary as Tapita O Tehenua, however, we may not be allowed to take with us as much in the way of pride in accomplishment. Yet our fate and that of the planet is not sealed. We have it within our grasp to seize the moment and redirect the trajectory of the future. The very hands that collectively shape and mold the planet in ignorance of long-term consequences today could be turned to world salvage. All we need do is connect the stars of the many disciplines of human thought and form a constellation of our own choosing. The question is not what kind of world we wish to raise our children in. Rather, it is what kind of world we wish to grow up in if we were to become children once again. We are Hanuan. Men work the quarry shaping stone at the behest of leaders striving for power. Stone axes drop trees to their knees all around us. Our island shrinks. The skyline expands in all directions. The ocean is now seen from all vantages. No canoes are visible along the shore. None exist to carry us to other lands, nor are we worthy of salvation if we simply end up exporting our excesses elsewhere. To gain a universe without limits, we must first accept the discipline of limitation. We are human. Men and women work together to ensure a glorious legacy for future generations. Stones of wisdom are quarried from the rocks of the ages under the inspiration of leaders who quest for the common good. Trees ensconce us in the canopy of nature's womb. One day, craft may take shape, carrying enlightened humankind to other worlds. Hanuan or human? Power or glory? Desert or forest? Cataclysm or spacecraft? The choice is yours. The choice is mine. The choice is ours. End of the World as We Knew It. Chapter 6. The Future Laid Bare. Today, many have serious doubts about the future of island Earth. Is the planet some call La Tierra, others Henua, Wenua, or Ard, following the same path of exploitation and collapse seen on Easter Island? Will those of us living in the age of global communications, monitoring the planet from the depths of space, allow ourselves to do in the next few generations what 40 did to the island of Tapita o Tehenua? Will our present society, standing on its current lofty peak of civilization, crash to earth like an ill-assembled house of cards? Will future generations be heir to the life of cultural desperation seen among the people of Het Eiland van Passen? Like the three masters of the age of discovery, will alien spacecraft ominously approach as our children cry out in fear and anguish, my God, why hast thou forsaken us?" Photograph page 45, a Catholic cemetery which eventually replaced cremation and Ahu bone vaults. The cost of not learning our lessons is extremely high. Easter Island teaches us that there is an ecological line that must not be crossed. Irrevocable damage to the environment means no going back. Should we continue our many wasteful and indulgent practices, Earth's resources may become so depleted and its life-nurturing system so degraded that whoever remains alive tomorrow will skid into a lifestyle hardly better than that of any indigent alive today. Are today's skyscrapers tomorrow's steel statue tributes to excess? Just where is our modern civilization on the timeline between colonization and collapse? Based on the Easter Island story, what are we placing at risk? How can we make a course correction and begin to write a new ending to the book of contemporary civilization? And if we fail, what kind of world will follow apocalypse? If Easter Island truly is a microcosm to island Earth in all particulars, it's clear that we Earthlings are slated to virtually destroy the natural world. This destruction will come about due to the relentless pursuit of ambitious undertakings have little to do with meeting our big picture, long-term needs. Today, we frivolously destroy tomorrow. Yet our choices will continue to make absolutely good sense right up until the very end. Following the collapse of our socio-ecological system, a much diminished population will survive to pick up the pieces. That effort will be set against the backdrop of a far less sophisticated technology and significantly reduced cultural inheritance. 90% of the human population will suffer and die as a result of one dumb thing leading to the next. The surviving 10% will have little left of real value to start over with. Those 700 million human beings will simply suffer. If the Easter Island story is our own, just as humankind begins to recover what little social security and well-being is possible, a fleet of 3 alien spacecraft will descend from on high for all to see. At first, the aliens will make no attempt to dominate the Earth, yet almost instantly humankind will begin to marvel at their technological superiority, even as the inevitable cultural shockwaves shake the unsure foundation of whatever society exists at the time. After a brief visit to ponder what was and the light of what is, the 3 craft will follow a reverse falling leaf path upward. Below, chaos will again run rampant throughout the earth. Despair and cruelty will rule as nation after nation attempts to arrogate control over whatever planetary resources remain, all in the vain attempt to measure up to the alien menace. 2 generations pass, and another group of space aliens return to see the consequences of the original intervention. In so doing, they discover a once global society fallen into ruin by way of a second wave of internecine conflict. Towering skyscrapers reported earlier are no longer seen. Most lie scattered in huge sections on the streets below. These aliens depart shaking whatever extremity passes for ahead. Other less adventurous but far more exploitative aliens drop by. Interstellar pirates abduct countless human beings, decimating the population further. Other aliens, bearing anatomies similar to our own, take delight in Earthwomen, who gladly give themselves up for various trinkets of advanced technology received as gifts or compensation. After all, Earthmen have no mana at all. Out there in the Milky Way, the good guys in white encounter suits eventually compel the bad boys to return numerous abductees. Unfortunately, the few survivors return contaminated with alien diseases, not to mention a whole new way of seeing things. Human populations slowly recover after a nadir of less than 200,000 men, women, and children throughout the planet. But for the first time, instead of coming, taking, and going, alien overlords take residence on the planet. In so doing, they sequester Earth vermin into squalid ghettos and grab up the best real estate. Soon thereafter, Earth Island is annexed by an ambitious third-rate interstellar power initially seeing the planet as part of a greater strategic plan. That same power quickly neglects their holding once the interstellar conflict encouraging annexation is resolved. World leaders see in alien annexation humanity's last best hope to enter the interstellar community. Many Earthlings begin to voluntarily relocate off-world by taking on low-grade tasks aboard spaceliners. Eventually, a few end up as resident aliens on some of the more advanced planets. From their new home, Terran emigres do what is possible to help families and friends still suffering back on Earth. A new breed of off-world quadruped is bioengineered and introduced to the Earth. The species multiplies and consumes much of the planet's remaining fresh water and verdure. Earthlings are made slaves to their care and feeding without benefiting one whit from their presence. Any human caught interfering in any way with this experiment is summarily dematerialized. A slow trickle of advanced technology begins to flow to Earth from emigrants on other worlds, but not enough to succeed in overthrowing the aliens holding the unnegotiated right to conduct bioexperimental business as usual on Earth. Eventually, all alien quadrupeds are removed from the planet, but only after a few visiting aliens of real influence begin to agitate politically on the annexing homeworld. Despite progress, Earthlings are considered too immature to govern themselves. After all, the foolish creatures knowingly chose to despoil a whole planet and are hardly any smarter for the experience. Besides, having never mastered interstellar spaceflight, they are obviously inferior and warrant no place in the interstellar community. Photograph on the top of page 49. In 1864, islanders toppled the last standing Moy. Meanwhile, an adventurous alien archaeologist, Thrym Eiderdal of Uppsala and Draconis, comes up with a peculiar notion that humans were not the first sentient beings on the planet at all. Thrym speculates that an ancient predator species solar sailed from Tau Ceti 80 million years ago. What was the motive of these adventurous aliens? To hunt dinosaurs. Many obscure artifacts and insightful arguments are used to make Thrym's point, including the massive brain-body mass ratio of the many raptorian skeletons found scattered inside museums on Earth. This particularly plucky archaeologist even proves that such solar sailing could be done, but ends up in the Alpha Centauri system during the attempt. Although such a bizarre sequence of events is unlikely to happen in the future, it does in fact parallel what happened to the people and place of Tapeta o Te Henua. An isolated island experiences ecological collapse due to the excesses of its inhabitants. After a huge population die-off, islanders achieve a benign equilibrium with the natural environment. But due to squandering the island's natural resources, the surviving few live on in cultural desperation without any possible recourse for going elsewhere. During this period, an effort is made to build a new, more harmonious society based on a slower pace of life. That venture is interrupted when outsiders possessed of an advanced technology discover the island. Culture shock resulting from the first contact sweeps through the population. Hysterical islanders tumble the icons of the old failed culture. Years later, the island is visited once again. Evidence of wholesale destruction is seen. Later still, the island becomes a stop for less nobly motivated outsiders, and a lengthy period of human and island exploitation follows. If we were to know in advance that such a future would come to pass on Earth, would we continue living as we do today? Sadly, the answer to that question is likely to be yes, as well as no. Why? Because changing ourselves is harder than destroying our world. End of the World as We Knew It, Chapter 7, The Crux of the Issue. Today we devote much energy, creativity, and material to issues of security, criminal justice, and national defense. We've placed our eyes at the lens of a collective microscope and seen small yet still important issues as something much larger than they actually are. What we think is serious today may actually be blinding us to matters of far greater significance tomorrow. We live in a virtual world, one becoming increasingly disconnected from reality. Photograph on page 51, along the road to Poike Peninsula. It shows a tarred road going off to the left and a stone wall branching off to the right, and then the ocean in the distance. Looming in the distance, seemingly much smaller by comparison, are fundamental problems threatening to obliterate the infirm foundation of today's civilization. Unlike the decline of Egypt, Babylonia, Greece, and Rome, little may remain for future generations to rebuild with. We now live in a global society. Once we plummet from our tower of isolation and sensitivity and excess, despair and cruelty will be our lot. At best, our heirs may have to content themselves with extracting what little of value is found among the many trash heaps marking the waste middens of a bygone era. An era when anything was possible, but little of enduring value actually done. Today, our chief deficiency is a lack of vision. Many fine minds live among us, minds capable of penetrating insight and extraordinarily creative problem solving. By arriving at a common goal of planetary significance, these minds could be unleashed in ways that would lead humanity into a brilliant future. Yet vision's instrument, leadership, often fails to see new possibilities, even when driven by the dark specter of looming necessity. Boldly said, we have less than 2 generations to bring into harmony the 7 main components making any technological advanced civilization possible. These 7 have to do with leadership, energy, raw materials, expertise, food, population density, and goodwill. By the time the children born to the generation who fought the Second World War pass into eternity, our collective fate will have been sealed. Leadership. Of the 7 components, the first and most comprehensive is the need for enlightened leadership. Enlightened leadership has one main virtue, the ability to address problems in advance of crisis. Because globally threatened issues such as global warming, soil depletion, energy production, and ill will are not being adequately addressed by the world community, it's evident that today's leadership component is deficient and in many cases actually exacerbates the problem before us. Were an enlightened leadership a hallmark of today's global society, it's clear that issues related to the other 6 components would be addressed successfully in advance of crisis. Let's see how this would play out. Energy. Resources would be redirected away from global warming-related fossil fuels. Conservation would be broadly and enthusiastically encouraged. Human expertise in the sciences and technology would be reassigned from lesser priorities and redirected to more sustainable forms of energy production, distribution, and storage. Combustion as an energy source would no longer be necessary. CO2 levels would stabilize and retreat towards historic norms. The Earth's polar caps would recover, storm systems and ocean levels would abate, species would regain traditional habitats. Raw materials. Recycling would become the primary source of basic materials, not extraction. Far fewer oil wells would be drilled and mines dug. Less of the Earth's surface would be disrupted. Minerals and metals would remain available for future generations, but only tapped later to meet as yet unforeseen needs. Waste would no longer accumulate in landfills and spill over into lakes, rivers, and oceans or seep into the aquifer. Toxic pollutants would be contained. The price we pay for things purchased would begin to better map against their true cost to the environment. Expertise. Children would be encouraged to take up educational pathways, giving them the opportunity to turn their innate genius to world salvage. Instead of the constant classroom struggle to train them as economically productive citizens, students would seize the opportunity to prepare for lives in which they contribute to a more wholesome world. Their first major step would be to absorb knowledge concerning world culture and the natural environment as much depth, diversity, and clarity as possible. Along the way, students would be exposed to big-picture, long-term issues. Ultimately, learning would arise more out of innate desire and aspiration and less out of external control and enforced discipline. Food. High-quality food of great biodiversity would be grown in ways that minimize soil depletion and prevent root layer salination. The spread of a risky, profit-based monoculture would be stopped in its tracks. Genetically modified seed and other organisms would be rigorously tested before exposing sensitive ecosystems to their unchecked presence. Food would be truly nutritious in that potencies unsuspected by current investigators will remain in plant and animal genomes and growth environments. Human health would improve significantly. The amount of money we spend on corrective health care significantly reduced. Population density. Birth control will be more broadly supported along with methods to prevent disease, venereal and otherwise. Population goals would be set high enough to ensure the dynamics of scale needed for a global culture, low enough to ensure lives of decency and creative opportunity for people everywhere. No child would be born unloved and unwanted. None would suffer deprivation, leaving them incapable of fulfilling their destiny. Regulation of population density must begin voluntarily and be promoted through widespread education. Since population levels have natural as well as social consequences, it's reasonable for governments to establish regulations with as much sensitivity as human choice as possible. Goodwill. In many lands today, politicians turn people against each other. This is done to sow seeds of dissension and unrest intended to expand and secure political power and influence. Meanwhile, global corporations place locks on governments and succeed in expanding their own opportunity at the expense of society as a whole. An example would be for leaders in government and business to set high examples of goodwill in every land. This would inspire people everywhere to see others as themselves, human beings capable of warmth, creativity, and caring. Objectification of others would fade with time. People would pull together while ensuring that the earth, its many species, and natural wonders are loved and respected. Goodwill is the leading socio-ecological indicator of a healthy society. Living in such a world might seem a dream. Yet for many, a society in which everyone gets along amicably and the natural world is held in high esteem would prove less than fully satisfying. There is something within us that drives us to take risks and adventure. We may never be content no matter what kind of world we create. As humans, we only seem to be satisfied during the process of creation and exploration itself. Because of this, our ultimate destiny may lie among the stars, a realm of no limits, only infinite possibility and ongoing challenge. Like Hanuans of times past, we strive for more. Humanity requires more than the vision of a utopian world where everyone lives an idyllic life filled with peace and serenity. Though such a world may appeal to some, others still feel the fire raging in the belly. Without a focus for that fire, future worldwide conflagrations are bound to occur, as has been the case in the not-too-distant past. The danger today is that our weapons are far too destructive, our world far too integrated, and the specter of resource depletion and ecological degradation far too disturbing. Vision, leadership, progress. Vision, capable of seeing the way clearly ahead and avoiding the shoals of calamity. Leadership, that inspires and motivates others along a path leading to the realization of the goal. Progress, within the limits of what is sustainable, recognizing the peculiarities of a human nature with a strong taste for excitement and a willingness to take risks. Perhaps in recognizing this one aspect of our nature, our need to do something, anything, we've arrived at the ultimate motive driving the Moy culture to extinction at the hand of its people. And in the same stroke, we've come to realize why subsequent generations of islanders live lives of such desperation, despite apparent fitness and health. Simply said, there's something powerfully compelling about the ritual of stone. Standing, tools in hand, amidst the fine-textured tuff of Rano-Rariku gave focus and direction to life. In so doing, unrelenting forces, like molten stone erupting from deep within the human subconscious, were assuaged. Gathering hundreds of clan members together, feeling the coarse texture of fibrous rope in tightly clutched palms, and heaving against the weight of massive shaped stone gave flex to muscles weary with leisure and pleasure. Leveraging wood on wood and stone on stone against the dead weight of gravity was to erect a potent phallus of well-earned success and participate in an orgiastic rite of incomparable consummation. Page 56, an illustration of how the Moy were erected by David A. Hardy. Yet the very thing that brought such delirium to body, mind, and spirit ravished the land, making it possible. Once the party of the Moy culture ended, a terrible price was paid in lost opportunity and idleness. It wasn't simply hunger that entered the bellies of islanders, for mischief too took residence there. To stalk one's own, to partake of their flesh, to make war on rivals, these things filled the void in men's souls. In doing, the human being finds ultimate satisfaction. To fail in recognizing this is to doom all utopian enterprises to failure, until such time that we become something more than human. Only then will the fire in the belly no longer master us, but we it. The human imagination is a remarkable gift. Blending thought and feeling, reinforced by subjective versions of all the five senses, we can safely experience unusual events and environments. Through the imagination, we can explore numerous possibilities and probe unlimited alternative realities. Using this one creative faculty, we can even arrive at potential solutions to problems and answer questions otherwise remaining unsolved. Using the imagination, we can see ourselves colonizing an island very much like Te Pita o Te Henua of old. Once well and safely settled, with all needs comfortably met, each day would inexorably succeed the previous and precede the next. From high island cliffs, we'd watch the sun travel its annual course, north and south, south and north. Twice each year, we'd see day and night come to perfect balance. Such a balance would be ours as well. For nature and humanity, humanity and nature would merge as one. We'd also watch a slim crescent moon begin its own cycle as it chases the fading light of a dusk over a distant western horizon. We'd see tides roll in and out as sun and moon exact their cyclical tide over Earth's waters. We'd watch clouds float by overhead, occasionally depositing cool rains on crop and canopy. We'd see women's bellies swell with child like the waxing moon itself. We'd see those same children emerge out of birth waters, grow, prosper, and age as we ourselves pass into senescence. Each and every night, darkness would settle over the island. In the dusk, we'd see the very brightest stars, Rigel Centaurus, Sirius, Canopus, Antares, Betelgeuse, and Acrux, brighten to capture our attention and imagination. From faded blue to indigo black, the sky would darken further. As the sky darkens from dusk to skydark, fainter companions would join each bright star. But we islanders wouldn't be able to join them. Not up there. Our lot is cast. We are and remain children of the earth, and looking up in awe and wonder at the night sky, we'd come to see how very small our place in the great scheme of things truly is. In reflecting, we might come to sense that a wrong turn has been taken, for a life of perpetual tranquility, even surrounded by family, friends, children, trees, and varied terrain, could never completely fulfill all aspects of our humanity. With this recognition, we'd find ourselves taking stone to stone. Out of the stuff of long-dead star and compact earth, we'd quarry icons of our recurring dreams and unrequited destiny. Rope in hand, side by side, we'd release the pent-up fire raging within us. Trees would fall. A path out of the caldera would form beneath foot and fallen log. Among high island cliffs, well away from the canopy of trees, foundation stones would be laid. There we'd erect tall tributes to our future selves. There we'd call out to sun, moon, planet, and star to look down upon us in naked brilliance and see that we too had once stood in their midst. But if truly wise, we'd never allow our statues to dwarf our trees. End of the World as We Knew It. Chapter 8, A Vision for the Future. One common thread stretches from 800 CE Te Pita o Te Henua to the 21st century Earth. That thread? The generations binding all humankind into a single skein of connectedness, a skein spinning outward from our own species like a gossamer web into the natural world as a whole, and from the natural world, quite possibly, to many other natural worlds. If we are to believe the visionaries among us, we humans have a destiny with the stars, but to fulfill that destiny we'll first have to get right with our home world, the blue planet. Indeed, without achieving a lasting and sustainable presence here, such a destiny may not even be possible. Image on page 59, an illustration of a new Earth taking form in the Milky Way. Assuming we succeed in achieving balance with each other and the natural world, the blue planet may one day shrink to be seen as a tiny gem through the portholes of colonial spacecraft. Yet despite the apparent shrinkage, our world would expand many times over. That expansion will continue as later still, our sun becomes a simple point of golden light glowing amidst numerous other stars in the indigo blackness of interstellar space. With such an expansion, humankind will no longer remain locked away on its birth planet. We will be free to explore a much larger, far more challenging universe. New Earths may lie before us, but only after old Earth gives us her blessing. From old Earth to new is but a single unbroken line of development. Yesterday's vision is tomorrow's reality, but first we must get past the shadow of our own ignorance and greed. Today's nightmare can, if we educate and discipline ourselves, be banished in the light of a new dawn of possibilities. The fingers of that dawn may either be reaching out to pluck the nightmare away or pull back a curtain revealing a wasteland littered with the detritus of concrete and metal statues toppled by our own hands. Decisions we make in life are often based on things having to do with personal survival, fulfillment of instinctual drives, and the satiation of desire. Yet the source of such influences is usually beyond immediate perception. We simply want what we want, when we want it, without even knowing why. But as social creatures, we actually behave in ways driven by the projections and expectations of others. Such seemingly harmless, socially induced behaviors can easily lead to destructive effects when allowed to go unexamined and unchecked by billions of people. Our only recourse to this possibility is for each of us to look within for sources of insight, inspiration, and discipline. Such inward turning is essential if we are to ever put the brakes on choices and behaviors that can lead to our collective undoing, once multiplied countless times over. Today, humanity is called by dint of imperious circumstance to avoid global catastrophe. To accomplish this, individuals must find a way to offset the momentum of a society driven to acquire more and more at the expense of other creatures and future generations. Although we live in a time of great technological prowess, society tends to be heedless of long-term consequences. Overcoming this tendency demands self-discipline, since the very society that would otherwise check against excess tends to promote its own undoing. Some of the most egregious events in human history have been fomented by groups of men and women sharing a common mindset along very narrow parochial and sectarian lines. The rise of the Third Reich was orchestrated by a few masterminds who saw in the German people an opportunity to play on insecurity and fear by making great promises about the future. This group, which included Adolf Hitler, did everything possible to purge themselves of dissenting voices. In so doing, the heinous possibilities of genocide and global conflict flourished until only the goodwill and courage of men and women from other parts of the world drew a line and pushed back against unmitigated evil. Today, we human beings are being called again to take up arms. This war, however, must be fought on the battlefield of the self. Any society ultimately hoping to inherit the stars must be made up of men and women who choose to do the right thing simply because it is the right thing. Social influences must play far less a role in disciplining behavior. Self-disciplined human beings are essential if we are to ever span the great void lying between old Earth and new. Future human crews and colonists will come to depend more and more on their own creativity and resourcefulness as first old Earth and later the sun disappears from view. Interpersonal goodwill will be of utmost importance to minimize chaffing and strife between participants and to ensure New Earth has the best possible start and greatest potential for cultural and environmental uplift. Goodwill will come out of simply choosing to do the right thing at the right time based on inner sources of discipline and genius. To succeed in such a venture, a new humanity must be involved, on Earth and in space. As Homo novo sapiens, they must have a well-developed capacity to learn from within. Learning from within is not entirely new to the human species. However, self-learning tends only to be cultivated by those who reflect deeply on life experience and draw insightful conclusions regarding the relationship between inner subjective states and outer practical realities. Self-learning, unfortunately, is not taught in our educational systems. It's taught by the metaphysical self looking out on the world through eyes undistracted by surface appearances. Such a self seeks connecting threads between apparently disparate events and phenomena. To make such learning possible, the mind must be equipped with a critical mass of facts and ideas originating from the cultural heritage, the many artifacts of knowledge making civilization possible. To accumulate this type knowledge is the objective of all modern education. Those boarding starships must be well stocked with a broad base of knowledge to truly be self-learners. Making interstellar colonization a possibility will take thousands of scientists, tens of thousands of engineers, and millions of technicians from all over the planet. Each must practice goodwill, be equipped with a critical mass of knowledge, and be able to follow complex, interconnected threads of relationship. A vast body of problems must be solved before our bodies may be safely ensconced in the artificial environments able to make 100-year-long journeys through the isolate netherworld between the stars. Today, we only undertake such journeys in our imaginations. Assuming New Earth is 100 light-years distant, an ongoing stream of asynchronous messages will pass back and forth as the mission unfolds. At first, mission controllers will provide advice and give consent concerning responses to unexpected events. Later, as the craft accelerates well away from Earth, problems will increasingly have to be resolved by crew members. Transmission delays on both ends marginalize the ability of mission controllers to analyze telemetry, devise solutions, and oversee results based on implementation by crew. This kind of helplessness is seen today in astronautics when real-time insertion programs are run aboard spacecraft approaching other planets throughout the solar system. In some ways, establishing New Earth will be easier than changing Old Earth. On New Earth, there'll be no age-old patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting to overcome. But there won't be the kind of sophisticated infrastructure needed to provide everything essential for comfortable living either. Interstellar colonists will have to use a number of small, well-chosen hand tools, plus a very few larger pieces of equipment to accumulate and manufacture the many things needed to reconstruct an entire civilization from scratch. With hope founded on what we now know of ecology and social psychology, such a colonial culture will avoid many of the pitfalls of humanity's adolescent past. Meanwhile, back on old Earth, circling a star no longer visible to the unaided eye, homeworld humanity will still be cleaning up after centuries of social and environmental abuse. Interstellar colonists will live a rather crude frontier life with little in the way of sophisticated recreation and other technological endowments. Sure, they'll be able to have all the children they wish, but somehow they must care for those children and provide them with everything needed to make progress towards a time when New Earth is as safe, comfortable, and convenient as old. Those of a pioneering spirit need only apply. Space colonists will have few of the restrictions found back in the homeworld to constrain them. Their lives will set them increasingly apart from those left behind. Entirely new patterns of behavior and social interaction will evolve. Some will arise out of the uniqueness of New Earths. Others will come about based on whatever cultural assets remain with them several generations removed from their departure from the solar system. Most will be based on the unique way in which colonists choose to transcend the past and create a future of their own. You and I won't be around to see the completion of the first successful venture to an extrasolar planet. We must content ourselves with somehow steering humankind away from the abyss towards some as yet unidentified star in the heavens. Today's generations get to make the fateful choices governing future possibilities. If we but safely plant the seeds, our children's children's children may one day see them grow to fruition. Photograph on the top of page 64. A rainbow surmounts the seven moi at Ahu Akivi. This now leads us to the afterwards, a parable of two great peoples. Once upon a time, a great people of the sea sailed a vast ocean looking for a new island home. Led by a great leader, this people of the sea left behind another, older island, and leaving, they searched for a new place to live comfortably, grow strong, and prosper. Like other leaders before him, the great leader of the people of the sea found a new island home. The island itself told him where to find it, for it is known by the people of the sea that birds fly many miles out to sea, eat, and return home again. Following the birds back was the great leader, his friends, and their families in large ocean-going canoes. In those canoes, the people of the sea carried everything needed to start all over again. Yet one thing was missing: wisdom. To start again, the people of the sea needed fresh water, food, clothing, shelter, and warmth. The island would provide all these things, but like all other islands before it, this island could only give so much, for so many, for so long. Eventually the people of the sea became the people of the island. This people went on to do what had been done to the old island of long ago. They took everything it had to give and wanted more. Because of this, the new island died just as the old one had. The people of the island did not take without giving at least one thing back. Working together, they made many large and wondrous stone statues and moved them many miles across the island. There the people stood the statues tall and serene with their stony backs to the sea. There, as ocean waves broke against high rocky cliffs, the great statues kept watch over the island and its people. What did the great stone statues see? They saw the people quarry, shape, and move ever more statues like themselves. Placed with their backs to the sea besides the old ones, statues old and new watched as islanders increased in numbers and prospered. Together, the statues watched tree after tree fall to the woodsman's axe. Together, they saw the wind carry the island's fertile soil far out to sea. What the stone statues did not see was a new great leader stand up to speak, saying, "Enough of statues. Let us take heart of our island, even as we revere the many statues overseeing us. Let us work to make our island young once again. Let us grow back the trees. Let us carve new canoes that our wisdom may travel with us to new lands. Let us prosper not only ourselves, but all the world." Because such a leader's voice went unheard, the island died, and with the island's death, so did a once great people. The few islanders remaining were later found by an even greater people of the seas. This people traveled across 2 great oceans in tall ships filled with incomprehensible things. Their ships were constructed of fine and highly crafted wood, admirably graced with brass trim and iron fittings. The ship's many sails billowed white and proud in the gleaming sun. This new people wore fine clothes and carried knowledge of a much larger world. They looked upon the stone statues in awe and wonder. How could such a poor people create such great things? Puzzled, they boarded their tall ships and departed. After watching the fine sails of the tall ships sink below a distant horizon, islanders looked on the stone statues that watched without comment as the ancestors killed the island and an even greater people moved among them and looked upon the island's death. Then the islanders did what had been done after the very last and greatest stone statue was placed on the high cliffs. They made war, and with war they pulled down the statues stood up by the ancestors. The island, weary and beaten, no longer even had something to show for all its suffering. Today, the people from across the 2 great seas prosper, even as the world grows old. The tall buildings they came to erect listen mutely for a great leader to say, "Enough of tall buildings. Let us take heart of our earth even as we revere our many great accomplishments. Let us work to make our world young once again. Let us grow trees. Let us carve out of this world great canoes to carry our newfound wisdom to new island earths awaiting us in the great ocean of space." We might ask why so few leaders speak of healing the earth. The answer is simple. Among all people, there are those who speak wisdom. The wise call attention to larger issues otherwise unnoticed. They point to deeper causes behind events. Prevention rather than correction is their counsel. The future guides their thoughts. Necessarily, they must point out the dangers of excess. Consequently, discipline and self-control is a large part of their message. Despite such candor and insightful intelligence, the wise rarely become leaders. Behind this lies the fact that the few selecting political candidates and the many voting them into office, where democracy is practiced, don't want to hear the wisdom of growing trees or making sacrifices for the greater good. They want to hear of tall buildings. They want to hear of wealth and good times aplenty. They want to hear of perpetual safety and satiety. They want to hear that whatever is believed today will remain forever true without cause for examination and change. No truly great leader appeals to a people's ignorance as though it were wisdom, nor do the wise make promises that in the long run cannot be kept. A truly great leader speaks to a vision, one requiring a people constantly adapt as they let go of naivete and embrace innocence. It's been said that the fool is the twin of the wise. This is no less true of the naive and the innocent, for the naive erect tall stone statues believing that in so doing everything will remain as it always has been. The innocent, however, erect the same statues, knowing that someday they may fall to earth at the hands of those who were once naive. Tepita Otehenua's great leader was known as Matua, striving parent. Priests, Oru Matua, were also thought of as parents. The children of such parents are not innocent. They are naive. Such children look up to mothers and fathers, believing them to be incapable of error. Once a child comes to recognize fallibility, he or she begins to seek out their own way. To grow up is to practice critical thinking. Critical thinking is not the same as innocence. Though a powerful tool, criticism too must eventually be set aside as the mantle of innocence descends over the shoulders. Today, many are no longer naive, yet far more remain so. Naivete is seen where unquestioning faith is placed in those who've been made leaders. Due to widespread naivete, we can predict with some hesitation that those believing such leaders to be great parents will one day overturn the icons of contemporary civilization. As this occurs, the ranks of the critical thinkers swell many times over. This, too, is progress. As such things occur, the innocent will look on in compassion, for they see the tumbled statues of a passing era as more than the symbols of childish ignorance. Things once cherished, then later overturned, are in fact the very icons of a creative process making human suffering and natural loss ultimately worthwhile. Perhaps one day the wise and truly innocent will come to lead us, but such a thing is not possible until we first learn to lead ourselves. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the World as We Knew It by Jeff Barbour, published by Golden Phoenix Publishing, available through Lulu Press. We hope that in listening to this reading that there's some inspiration to be found. Things are about to change on the planet. Those things probably won't be particularly comfortable, but I think we can say with confidence that for every death, there's a rebirth. For every change, there's a passing of things that are no longer of value, and the opportunity to create new things of greater potential. Thank you very much. This is Jeff Barbour speaking. Bye-bye.